Now, let's go to a new series of attacks from closed guard, one of my personal favorites and one which has been effective since the earliest days of jiu-jitsu. This is the high cross. The idea is that as we line up in closed guard with our training partner, we are more or less parallel with them, lined up spine to spine. We are going to position our body like a T, perpendicular and even beyond perpendicular, relative to our opponent. If we can form that cross shape relative to our opponent and at the same time lift our hips high off the mat, so you have a high and cross, then you can go into a large number of highly effective attacks out of closed guard situation. Your first goal is to be able to achieve the high cross position. Sometimes when people see high cross demonstrated, they think to themselves, oh man, I could never do that move. You need to be very flexible to do it. That is not true at all. You need very modest levels of flexibility to hit this move. I certainly don't consider myself a flexible person. The only flexibility you really need is something you can all easily achieve. And this is simply taking your legs over your head and touching your toes and the balls of your feet flat to the ground. If you can do this and then separate your knees a little bit, you have more than enough flexibility to hit this move. So it doesn't require any kind of extraordinary flexibility on your part at all. The other things you will need are a good collar tie and a good scoop grip inside your training partner's leg. If you can get those two things along with some modest levels of flexibility, you can definitely hit a high cross and make it one of your favorite moves from closed guard. Let's have a look at it right now. Okay, so from a closed guard situation, we're going to take our hand and go over our training partner's arm. Just change your ankle to slightly this way. So I go over my training partner's arm and I take a good collar tie. My second hand goes here inside my training partner's leg. Okay. From the initial closed guard, we're going to get an initial angle. I do that by turning my leg so that my knee points down towards the floor. That's going to become important for the next step of the move, which involves throwing my leg past his shoulder. My knee must go past his shoulder. Okay? You're getting close now to the high cross. Your butt's starting to come up off the floor. You're keeping his head low, and you're starting to win the battle for height, your hips versus his head, and you're forming that T shape. Sometimes, however, you'll want to go further than this and form an even more extreme angle. The way we do this is by kipping with our leg. So we throw our leg out and kip 1, 2, 3, and come out even more extreme so that my foot can touch the mat all the way out like so. And from this position, you've achieved the high cross. From here, you have many forms of very, very useful attack. Okay? Now, giving you guys some simple cues that will know you're going to succeed with this move. If there's one simple cue that I would give above all the others, it's this. Get your ear to your training partner's knee. Okay? If you can touch your opponent's knee with your ear, you're going to be in a great position to hit the high cross. And the second one, get your ass up off the mat facing towards the ceiling. Don't have your body flat on the ground. You're not going to be effective from there. So the two big cues that I want you to have as you perform this move, get your ear to his knee and get your butt up high facing towards the ceiling. If you can do those two things and get to that perpendicular position, you're going to have a lot of success from closed guard. So let's have a look at this again. We start off closed guard situation from here. We go in, we get a good collar tie. Now we scoop inside our training partner's leg. Initially it's just wrist deep. Now from here we start an action of turning our legs so that my legs, in this case my right knee, faces down towards the floor. Now from here I throw this leg and I pull my ear to Jay's knee, like so. Once my ear touches the knee, I take my knee and I put it over his head. So my knee wins the battle for height. It's higher than his head. Okay? Still holding on. If I decide that I want even more angle than this, then we use the kipping method, where I throw my leg and I kip back so that my hips come out even further. If necessary, I would even be able to touch the floor with my foot. And then I come back and I put my knee on the back of his head. This is the high cross. My knee is on the back of his head My ear is on his knee, and my butt is off the floor, pointing up towards the ceiling. Okay? So one more time. Same angle, buddy. Once we start off in a closed guard situation, first things first, collar tie. Second thing, scoop grip. Just wrist deep at the start. From here, turn your body, and then the big first throw. My leg comes out like I'm casting a fishing rod. And that brings my left knee all the way around behind him. My ear is touching his knee. My knee is behind his head. My butt is facing up towards the ceiling. This is good. I can go even further by whipping my hips out. If necessary, I could even touch the floor with my knee. My knee is behind his head. My butt is facing up towards the ceiling, and my ear is touching his knee. This forms the high cross position. If we can get to there, we have many highly effective forms of attack. The first attack that we want to look at out of the high cross is the one you'll be using the most, I believe. This is the Jujigatami armbar. When you form that T shape relative to your opponent and even go beyond it by kipping with your legs, you're going to find it's pretty easy to throw your legs up into a very, very strong attacking angle and finish a lot of people with Jujigatami. Let's have a look at how this works. Okay, from a closed guard situation, we managed to get a hold of our training partner's head. You will notice that Jay's arm is inside my overtime. From here, I pull my wrist inside his legs, and we get our initial angle. Now we make that first big throw that takes my left knee all the way around behind his head. My ear is touching his knee. You can see Jay's fist is right there in front of me. If for whatever reason I feel the angle is inadequate, I can always add a little more angle, like kipping. Once we get that kip, I jam his head in place with my knee. Now I can take my hand and surround his forearm. So I go from head to wrist. You will notice that Jay's head is caught between my knee and my ankle. I'm not relaxed. There's tension here. So when he goes to posture up, it's not so easy. It's like this knee blocks his head, wedges it in place. This foot tries to touch my own knee. I'm not relaxed. If I relax, he postures up, it's all gone. I want tension. He goes to pull out. It's not as easy as it looks. Now, even as I let him go and he starts to posture, I throw my leg and catch him. If he stays with his hands unlocked, he gets finished right here. So of course he has to lock his hands defensively. When we see that, we just take our feet and pressure them forwards and then tilt our training partner over. My hand goes to my own thigh. We recline back to our elbow and my 2 feet back heel strongly. We've got this guy in the perfect position to attack with Jujigatami and finish him. Let's have a look at all that from another angle. From a closed guard situation, we start off collar tie. Second hand, wrist deep inside the leg. First big throw comes off an initial movement to the side. It gives me just enough angle to make that big throw around the corner. I put my knee in behind his head. I make an assessment. Do I need more angle? If so, we get it. Now, I put my knee jammed behind his head. I'm elbow deep inside his knee, and my ear is touching his knee. I convert from his head to his wrist and forearm, and I pinch my 2 legs together so that even as he goes to pull away from me, he walks right into a very finely applied Jujigatami. My hand goes to my own thigh, and now we're looking good. One more time. Jujigatami. From an initial closed guard, we come up and get a good grip around the head and neck. Hand scoops inside. Legs scissor round. Then the first big throw. that connects my ear all the way up to his knee. We make an assessment. Do I need more angle? If so, we take it. We lock him in place. My feet tense. He goes to pull away. Not so easy. Catch. Place him down. And a winning position now we have. Okay? So, there you have the high cross into Jujigatame. A really practical way for athletes to get into one of the best finishing moves in the sport. Now, we just looked at Jujigatame out of the high cross position. It's probably fair to say that that will be the major form of attack that you use out of this position. However, there is a close second. This will be variations of the triangle. The variation I'm going to coach you through is Hantai Senkaku. I believe it's the best one out of this position, but it's not your only option. We'll see that there's others. This is a very important secondary move to have because it deals with the most common way in which people resist the initial Jujigatame that we just looked at previously. So let's have a look at this right now. Okay, we've seen that from a closed guard, this series starts with us getting a collar tie over our opponent's head and trapping this arm in place. Now you will see, guys, that there's not a lot of trapping going on here. Your opponent's elbow is free to move at any given moment. Okay? Once you understand that, you'll realize that when you get into the winning position, the guy could conceivably pull his arm out at any given moment before you get your knee behind his head. So, when we start working in this position and we come out to our angle, there's going to be many days, especially once you get a reputation as someone who's good with the Jujigatame, that people are going to start to anticipate this big throw. And they're going to pull that elbow out. And you're like, God damn it, I just missed my Jujigatame. Don't worry. You've got something just as good, if not better. From here, we just throw our knee right over our training partner's head. And now you have the head and the arm, and you guessed it, the triangle. Now, fellas, if you went for a basic front triangle from here, you could do it. It's not wrong to do it. But look how far I have to move. I'm all the way on Jay's left-hand side. For me to swing back all the way 180 degrees to the right-hand side to perform a triangle is a huge movement. And in that time, he can posture up and you can lose everything. So why? Well, why would you want to move such a long distance? There's no need. Instead of using the front triangle and having to move 180 degrees across in front of your opponent, just stay right where you are and use Hantai Senkaku instead. You don't have to move anywhere. And you got arguably a tighter lock. So, we're going to start off just in like so. We start that initial movement out to the side and he yanks his arm out. No problem. We put our knee right behind our training partner's head. Okay, when he goes to pull out a second time, it's going to be damn hard. You've got so much real estate behind his head here, it's going to be hard for him. Now we grip either your shin or his tricep. They're both good options. I normally grab my own shin, but I have students who grab the tricep and they do just fine with that. Now from this position, see my right knee? I want to put it underneath the sternum. So my ear comes into my training partner's knee, and then I start that action of finding that angle that we like. Now I pull everything in and I lock the figure of four. When Jay tries to pull away, it's awfully difficult. Now you can just strangle him right here. That'll work. If he stands up to his feet, just scoop inside his legs and put him right down and strangle him here. I leave that up to you and what your opponent does. So once again, we have an opponent in our closed guard. We start that action of coming out to the side. But before we can lock up the Jujigatame, he pulls his damn hand up, no problem. We lock the Hantai Senkaku. From here, I grip either his tricep or my shin, and I focus on getting my knee under his sternum. If my knee is above his arm and shoulder, it'll never work. So your whole thing is to pull your knee around to an angle where it goes under his armpit, close to the sternum. Now, we take our legs and hips and lock the triangle. Right from here, he goes to yank out. He goes to posture up like you would to a normal triangle. It's not going to happen. Then we just squeeze, and it's done. Okay? Jay will tell you it's a It's a very efficient strangle. It goes right around your neck, right from the start, and you feel like a damn tourniquet has been put around your neck. And it usually results in a very quick submission hold. I know there's a lot going on there, so let's look at it from another angle. Closed guard situation. We lock up, grip our training partner, and we start turning the corner. Unfortunately, he's able to rip his arm out before we get the juji. No problem. When he tries to pull his head out, he can't because of my collar tie. So I just throw everything up into place. Now from here, I grip either my own shin or his tricep. And from this position, I start turning underneath him, getting my ear all the way to his knee. Now we just take our legs, we're pinching with our legs as always, so that when we lock the figure of 4, we can adjust, lock, and strangle. Now, just going to show you one close to the camera so you can see the crucial detail of my knee. Jay, let's rotate this way. Good. Okay. He goes to yank out. Watch my right knee. My right knee has to rotate through underneath him. Okay? So I take my ear to his knee. And I turn my toes to face this way. If my toes face up, it's hard to get the rotation. So we rotate this way. Can you see how my knee is right in front of his chin and sternum, well below his armpit? If I'm up over here, this is time for front triangles. Okay? So we rotate through under here. I grab here or here. I leave that up to you. Both good. From this position, my whole leg is on his upper back. Don't have your leg out here. He can move his head. Have your whole leg on top of his back. Now, we lock the figure of 4. If necessary, hand adjusting. He tries to yank out, and it's done. Okay? Now, some of you might be looking at that and saying, hey, dude, I'm never going to do that. I'm not flexible at all. And my knees don't come to my chest, and it's just not going to happen. I can lock a front triangle, but I can't lock a Hantai Senkaku. First, I would say give yourself a chance. Okay, you may not be that flexible right here, right now, today, but a few months of bending forward, it's not really that much. We're asking in terms of flexibility. It's just the ability to bring your chest to your knees. It's not really advanced flexibility at all. You'll be able to do it. Nonetheless, I want you to get good quickly, so I'll also show you now how to use the front triangle, Omote Senkaku, just in case you don't currently have the flexibility for a Hantai. Okay. Same situation. Close guard. We lock in, we make the turn, he yanks his arm out. We throw our legs over the top and we lock our feet. Okay? Now, we're going to go through, we're going to hunt for our training partner's arm. As I take my hand out, I'm going to physically punch my body across. Okay? Now, this is where things get unstuck. When I go to make the transition, that's when the head comes up, the arm comes out. Okay? So when we go to make the transition, cover his damn shoulder. See the shoulder? Cover it. Okay? Once you cover the shoulder, he goes to yank out, even with no hands. When you can't see the shoulder, all I have to do is cross my ankles and keep his head pinned between my knees. Jay can stand up and deadlift me off the floor. Sorry, I'm getting too fat in my old age. Jay can't deadlift me anymore. You see the advantages of old age? Now, from this position, it's very, very easy for us to come up and grab our own foot, lock, and there's the figure of 4 for the finish, okay? So if you're not the most flexible guy in the world and you're looking at Hantai Senkaku, that's not my move. Don't worry, we can still hit a good front triangle, Omote Senkaku. I do recommend make his shoulder disappear though. So let's have a look at this again. Okay, we start off, we get that initial grip, we move out to an angle, and then from this position, we come whipping around the corner into the high cross position. From high cross, we'd love to just go straight into Jujigatame and finish this guy. But unfortunately, he rips his damn arm out. No problem, we lock. Now we're stuck underneath him, maybe he's putting his weight on us, and we're like, oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna turn under this guy. I don't have the flexibility, okay? No problem. we're going to push, and we're going to take our right arm out from his legs, and then from here we're going to gather up his arm. From here I'm going to cover his shoulder. Just a very small movement. Don't unlock and bring it over. Remember, the whole time he's going to be posturing up. So it's important that I'm pulling in with my knees. As I pull in with my knees, I just turn this way just a little bit, Jay. Nope. Okay. See, you can see Jay's shoulder. When I bring my knees forward, I cover. I want to spend as little time as possible with my feet unlocked, because that's when people posture up and pull away. So once we go in here, I pull everything forward and I cover his shoulder. Now an experiment. Jay, just do whatever you can to yank your head out of here. It's not easy. And then from here, we grip, lock, and it's done. So at no point did my feet come open and give my opponent an easy avenue to pull his head away from us, okay? And this is a very practical way in which we can use armbar and triangle in unison from the high cross position to deal with knowledgeable resisting opponents. Some of you are probably looking at the previous move and saying, okay, it looks good. I like the idea of the Hantai Senkaku, but I don't think I'm going to have the flexibility to get my knee turned inside, or maybe my opponent just resists me and I can't get my knee inside. What do I do? No problem. You've got a great option there. If you can't get your knee, either because of flexibility issues or because of your opponent's unanticipated lines of resistance, you can simply switch off to Kimura from the Hantai Senkaku. So, from a situation where we start off with our training partner in our closed guard, we go into the high cross position, coming all the way out to the side. We do a good job of getting out to a good angle, but he does a good job of pulling his arm out. So you've lost the Jujigatame, it's gone. No problem. We start to threaten the triangle. But for whatever reason, we feel we're having issues getting our knee underneath, okay? And we end up in positions where the knee is too high for a strangulation. Don't worry, you still got good options here. We're going to lock a Hantai Senkaku with no anticipation of strangling someone. We're just going to lock him up to control his head and his arm. Now from here, we're going to square up. We're going to lift our hips to expose our training partner's wrist. Once we get the wrist exposed, we turn it around the corner. We lock up the figure of four. When Jay goes to twist out of this Kimura, it's so damn difficult because the head and arm are constrained by my triangle. Normally, Kimuras are not really that tight from bottom position. Take your right arm out, buddy. Your opponent from here can make a lot of resistance by posting with his right hand on the mat, bringing his head up and straightening his arm, and it would be quite difficult to finish. Okay? All that goes out the window when you can put much more weight over your opponent's head, courtesy of that triangle. Okay? Now it's very, very difficult for him to resist because of that much stronger leg control that we have. Now you've got tightly controlled wedges around your opponent's head and one arm. So now I just take Jay's elbow and connect it to my left armpit. So his left elbow to my left armpit. And now just a tiny range of motion gets us a very tight submission, okay? This is a great move. Anytime you feel like inverting underneath your opponent is either physically difficult or you just can't do it because of his resistance. So here we are, we grip, get our body inside, and there's our beginning position. Now, we whip our legs all the way around the corner. We try hard to get this guy in the Jujigatame. He pulls his arm free, and we lock up here. We'd love to hit that fancy-looking Hantai Senkaku, but for whatever reason, I find my knee comes up just too high, and the strangle is out of the question. No problem. We lock up a triangle over the head and the arm. There's no strangle here because my triangle is locked the wrong way. However, there is a great opportunity to secure our training partner's wrist and lock everything up tight. From here, I take his elbow, in this case his left elbow, to my left armpit, and then even a tiny range of motion results in a very strong Kimura lock. Okay? So this is an excellent way to use that high cross position to enter into a fine submission hold. It's particularly well suited to people who maybe aren't the most flexible or have difficulty for whatever reason inverting underneath and getting that knee into the strangle position. And as a result, you hit a particularly tight form of Kimura. This form of Kimura, in my opinion, is one of the tightest of them all. It has a lot of advantages in terms of mechanical tightness over the basic Kimura from guard position. Try to use it whenever you can. Now, we've been looking at the high cross position, one of the premier methods of entering into arm bars, triangles, even the Trimura lock. Let's start to look now at the idea of high cross failure leading down to lower body submission. We're going to make use of omoplata. Ordinarily, omoplata is used in ways that are pretty well known. The direction we'll be taking omoplata is downstairs to the legs. So we'll use omoplata not in a conventional sense, but in a sense where we just use it as a holding mechanism. Let's have a look at this right now. From a situation where we start off with a training partner in our closed guard, we do a good job of getting into the initial high cross position, drawing this guy forward, turning our hips out to the side, and then from here, moving our body around the corner. Once we get to positions like this, very often we get people pulling away from the armbar and we lose the leg. Now, we'd love to go into triangles from here, but let's be honest, some guys defend triangles pretty intelligently. They keep a hand inside my leg so that I can't maneuver into a triangle, etc. When we see this, an excellent option is to release the head and catch our training partner at the tricep. We're going to throw our legs through and lock a conventional looking omoplata. Now, conventionally, omoplata, my knee goes higher than my training partner's shoulder. And typically we look to reach over our training partner's back and move forwards. That can be quite difficult on skilled, knowledgeable opponents who typically do a good job of posturing up and making things hard to finish with a regular omoplata, particularly where we work without the benefit of the gi. So what we're going to do is a different strategy. Instead of trying to take my knee over the top of his shoulder, we're going to bring it underneath his sternum. Okay, so you could already tell from that, I'm not interested really in the omoplata as a means of finishing or even sweeping my opponent. I'm interested in going downstairs to the legs. So from here, we're going to turn our knee underneath our training partner. Instead of going forward, we go underneath, just like so. Now, when Jay tries to posture up, my knee position makes it quite easy. Go posture up, buddy. Makes it quite easy to keep his head down, okay? Because all my weight is pressuring downwards to the floor. And this is going to create situations where we can reach for our training partner's foot and draw the foot across our chest. Once we do this, we cover it and lock the heel up. Okay, when Jay goes to pull his arm free, it's not as easy as it looks. Okay, when he goes to posture up, again, it's not easy with that downward pressure with my knee below his sternum. And we've now created a situation where we split our training partner's legs. I unlock the triangle of my legs and start pushing with my lower leg to create distance. If you want, you can post on his other leg. It's not essential, however. What is essential is that this foot kicks through and hooks inside my training partner's other leg. Don't worry, I'll show you from a better angle very shortly. From this position, we just take our training partner's body, push everything forward, and then we go in and connect our legs in a classic triangle. We now find ourselves in an excellent position to attack with a simple backside 50-50 type situation. When he goes to peel away from us and move away, you've got an excellent control over your training partner's legs and you're ready to finish. So, seen from another angle, we start off closed guard situation. From here, we do a good job of drawing this guy forward and getting to an initial angle to attack the arm. Unfortunately, we lose the arm and that forces us to make a transition into omoplata. So from here, I catch the tricep, throw my body even further around, and then from here, I lock up a triangle with my legs. But of course, it's not a true triangle. We didn't have the head. It's omoplata. Normally, in omoplata, we're fighting to get our knee as high as possible and forwards. Instead, we look to slip our knee underneath our training partner's sternum. I use my legs to force Jay to base out in this direction and drive his body weight forward. I catch his foot and expose the heel. We lock it in like so. From here, as we push away on our training partner, we create sufficient space to thread our foot through and get our foot right there, sitting up, Jay, in front of the quadricep. Now I just have to bring this leg down and lock up my triangle. Don't be naive and have your foot in a position where you can lock a figure four toe hold. Keep your toes down towards the mat. And then from this position, we lock up and we're in perfect position to finish. Seen from another angle. We start off, closed guard situation. We draw this guy forward and make a quick turn out to the side. As I feel I'm losing, we go through lock, and we get to that modified omoplata. We catch our training partner's foot and draw it across. When he goes to pull his arm free, it's not as easy as it looks. It's a pretty good tight lock there with that modified omoplata. We catch and expose our training partner's heel. As I push away with my legs, I expose space to get my foot through as a hook. Now we simply lock our legs in a triangle and find ourselves in the perfect position to get strong finishes down here on the mat. Let's look in more detail at this omoplata action. Typically, omoplata relies on the height of my knee. It involves moving away from our training partner and then coming up into positions where we have height over our training partner, like so. Okay. Here, we're doing something quite different. We're taking our knee and bringing it through underneath our training partner's sternum. This provides a very strong pushing force downwards to the mat. So when Jay goes to posture up, it's very easy to force everything down. It also means there's a big distance into which we can maneuver our training partner's legs and start that action of locking up. It's an unusual heel hook because you're getting to the heel long before you get to the Ashigarami. Now from here, as we push on our training partner, the space between the knees widens. Even if I did lose the arm at this late point, my knee is in front of his knee. So if Jay tried to knee slide away from me, he'll always end up exposing himself to the Ashigarami. Now from here, we lock up. We're using a 50-50 version of Ashigarami from the back. When he tries to peel out, very, very difficult. Even if he did manage to backstep over, it would be an easy thing for us to follow his backstep, touch our forehead on the mat, and from here drive through to a good finish. One more time. We have an opponent in our closed guard. We come up, get our initial grips that will take us into the high cross position. As we come around the corner, we unfortunately lose our training partner's arm. No problem. I find I can't transition to a triangle, so we transition to omoplata instead. We take our knee and slip it through underneath the sternum. My training partner goes to posture up and finds it much more difficult than he anticipated. We lock up the heel. As we fight for control, he tries to yank his arm free. We thread the legs in. We lock up the figure of four, and we're ready to finish. Okay? This is an excellent way for us to use upper body controls to enter into the legs downstairs. We've been looking in some detail at the high cross position. I really want you guys to become strong at this position. I fervently believe it's one of the very best attacking positions in the whole bottom game of Jiu-Jitsu, and in the closed guard in particular. It's important that we be able to tie together the various moves that we looked at. There's not a vast number of moves from here, but they're all damn good ones. They go together exceptionally well. What you need is a good, strong start to the move. That's why I heavily emphasize the collar and the scoop grip, so that you can quickly pull yourself to that perpendicular angle that you're looking for. If you can get perpendicular with your ear on your training partner's knee, your hips up high facing towards the ceiling, and your knee behind your opponent's head, those three key elements: ear to your opponent's knee, knee up and over your training partner's head, and this crucial idea of hips high up off the floor. Those three things, you're going to finish a lot of people. But it's important you be able to tie together the various finishes, because as you become strong at any one of them, people will start to anticipate them and resist. The good news is you can attack anywhere from upper body to lower body, joint locks, strangleholds. You're going to have a lot of success. You can tie them all together. So let's look briefly at the idea of unifying all the high cross material that we've looked at. Okay, one thing's for sure. It all begins the same way, regardless of which route you take. This is the idea of keeping his elbows well forward, up towards the line of your chest. Okay, if the elbows are far back here, there's better things you can do. Okay, so your first thing is to get those elbows up nice and high. Then from here, we get into our standard start position. I get wrist deep inside the knee, and I get wrist deep around the collar and hold them in tight. Now, a quick movement of our legs. So we go from classic closed guard to an angle like so. And now the most important step is the first one. When we start throwing this leg, I want to get my ear to his knee, my hips up high, and hopefully my knee behind his head. Okay, so my knee behind his head, my ear touching his knee, and my hips high up off the floor, facing towards the ceiling. If I can do those three things, you're going to be in good shape now to start finishing people. Your first finish will always be Jujigatame. If for whatever reason your opponent manages to yank out, your second finish will always be the triangle. Once we lock up here, you have the choice between triangle going underneath them, a Hantai Senkaku, this is our favorite, or pulling across all the way out to the other side, turning off the shoulder, and going into a Mote Senkaku. Okay? If we get to a position like so, and we manage to lock our triangle, but we feel that the ability to strangle is not there, then Trimora will be our favorite option. We pop up to expose the wrist, and then from this situation, we lock the Kimura out of the triangle. If for whatever reason, we're in here, we cannot make the transition into triangle, no problem. We grab triceps, lock, and we dip our knee underneath our training partner's sternum. So we can start pushing, and breaking his balance. Now we take the exposed foot and get to the heel. Once we get to the heel, it's all about throwing our leg over and locking up the backside 50-50 and getting our finish. Okay? So once again, we have our opponent in our closed guard. As we work in this position, we get a good start, threatening and locking. If we feel, for whatever reason, we can't get through and he pulls the arm free, then from this position, we're always looking to lock up alternative triangles. If we feel, and out of all that becomes impossible, the legs are a fantastic option. Okay? So always you're thinking in those terms. You need a good, strong start. That's defined by your ear to your training partner's knee, your hips up high off the floor, and your knee tucked securely behind your opponent's head. I always recommend start with the armbar threat. It's the number one move from there. You lose the arm, go into your triangles. You feel you can't get a stranglehold, go to Trimora. You fail upstairs, lock the omoplata very briefly, and then go downstairs for your heel hooks. If you can have that sequence in mind as you work with this move, you're going to finish a lot of people from closed guard. We've been looking at a bunch of very important series of attacks from closed guard. Now let's go to one of the most well-known and a very important part of your development. This is the side sit-up series. A side sit-up involves any situation where from a closed guard where our opponent is on two knees, we manage to successfully bring our body up into a position where our hips are up on top of our opponent's hips and our head is at least the same height as his head. This typically involves you posting on your hand and in some cases your elbow. Okay? The number one move from this position, in my opinion, will always be the hip sweep. We'll be spending quite a bit of time on it. It's one of the best moves in the sport insofar as if you successfully hit it, you get points for both the sweep itself and the mounted position, which almost always ensues from it. One of the great advantages of this sweep, of course, is that because it's performed from closed guard, anytime you hit it, you end up mounted on your opponent, unlike most guard sweeps where you end up in your opponent's open guard. Now, key elements, the height of my hips. We're going to be looking at the idea of driving our hips up over our opponent. It looks on the face of it like you're underneath, you're in bottom position, but if we play our cards right from this position, what makes it work, what makes it an important position for you to understand is the idea of height can be deceiving. Okay, ostensibly I'm underneath my opponent, but if my hips are on top of his and my chest is the same height as his chest, who's really on top here? Okay, my hips are on top of his hips, and that's the more relevant part. So, in closed guard, we start with our hips on top. The idea behind a side sit-up is I need one more part of my body. I need my upper body, My lower body is on top of his, but his upper body is on top of mine. If we can perform a side sit-up, then we get to situations where not only is my lower body on top of his, but my upper body is as well. Okay, so even though ostensibly I'm still underneath my opponent, you're in a position now where you can dictate terms and really start to get on top of people. That's the basic mechanical idea behind a side sit-up. Now the big question is, okay, I understand the idea of top and bottom now, you've explained that, but how the hell are you going to get there on someone who doesn't want you to sit up? It should be pretty easy for an opponent to hold us down, though, if he just uses his hands, etc. Yeah, it is. It's not easy against a skilled, knowledgeable opponent to hit the side sit-up, but there's some tricks that'll make it a lot easier. First element, you can never come up straight towards them. Okay, that's just condemning yourself to failure before you even begin. The idea is I want my shoulders to go to the side. Okay, the obstacles to coming up will always be his hands, his inside shoulder, and his head. Okay, the hands are the first line. That'll stop you from getting up. If I get past the hands, the next thing that'll stop you is his damn shoulder. As he puts his arm and bicep around you, can return you to the mat. And the third thing that'll stop you is his head position. When I turn out to the side, he moves his head, I can't get past his head. Okay, so those are the three obstacles we've got to remove. We've got to remove the hands, we've got to get past this bicep / shoulder, and you've got to get past his head. Okay, so one of the best things we can do in this situation is to start off with the idea of misdirection. I'm going to take my body to what appears to be a sit-up to a given side. Okay, so I fake like I want to sit up in this direction, so his head goes to follow me. All of his impetus is going to his right hand side. If I now change my direction, I can catch him on the half beat and get to a situation where I come up and beat him to the punch and come up to his left hand side. Okay, so I threaten to his right, I come up, I see him defensively tracking me, I take advantage of his defensive overreaction and come up in the opposite direction and get to what I really wanted to get to. This good high position with my hips on top of his and my chest and head the same height as his. Okay, so misdirection is your first cue. Look how Jay goes to follow me. When he follows me to a given side, everything opens up on this side. I know where I'm going. He doesn't follow until it's too late. And then from here, we're up, our hips are over his, and we're ready to go. Let's face towards the camera, Jay. So you can clearly see I start a misdirection to my left and then come up to my right. Okay, that's a very good way for us to get into the side sit-up position. Okay, another good way to get into the side sit-up position, beating your opponent's hands. Very often from here, we'll just get a hold of our training partner's hand, like so. Okay, once I get a hold of my training partner's hands, I fake like I want to pull inwards and go into all the underhooks that we saw earlier in this video. Okay, so he's intimidated by the fact that we're trying to pull him forward. So what do you think he's going to do? He's going to pull back. As soon as we see the pull back reaction, from here we follow and bring ourselves up into situations where we can start knocking people over. Okay, so I bring everything in a forwards direction as I feel the pullback. That's what we're looking for. Now we're in a good position to sit that, come up into a side sit-up position. Okay, so our first method is misdirection. I fake to a given side and come up to the other. The second method involves a pull, and off that defensive reaction, we come up and go. Okay, why is this working? Because what stops me coming up is his hands and his head. Okay, but if I pull and the hand moves away from me and the head's moving back and away, well then it's very easy for us to start coming up and into our various attacks. Okay, so these are two classic ways for us to get into this side sit-up position. Another one which I favor a lot is to fake the high cross. From a closed guard situation, from here, I start pulling down, you see pullback reactions. As you feel the pullback reaction, you start coming up into your attacks from side sit-up. So from here, he feels everything's about that forward pull. Okay, I just bring my hand down, and as I feel I lose my training partner's head, we bring everything up, and now we're into side sit-up territory, ready to play. So everything again is a forward pull, hand slips out, and side sit up. Once you get the side sit up, your hips are over his hips, your shoulders are over his shoulders, your head higher than his head. Ostensibly, you're on top of him at this point. Okay? I know it looks, well, you're still in guard position, so theoretically you're on bottom. But if my hips are on top of his hips, my shoulder's over his shoulder, my head is the same height as his head, who's really on top here? When we wrestle for top position, you'll always have a significant advantage from there. Okay? So these are some really practical ways for us to get into the side sit-up position. We looked at a bunch of more or less industry standard methods of entering into the side sit-up. They're good, they work well. I've seen plenty of people have a lot of success with them over the years. However, I want to spend a little extra time on my favorite entry into the side sit-up position and talk about why it's my favorite. Okay, we've seen that when it's time to enter into the side sit-up, the big challenge that you face is going directly into your opponent's body weight. He can stop you with his hands, he can stop you with his shoulder and bicep, and he can stop you with his head position. And all of those will make it quite hard for you to hit a side sit-up. Especially once you hit the move once or twice, one of the big drawbacks of any move from a side sit-up is that the movement is relatively long and slow to get to the position. And you're going right through the front door. So it can be tough sometimes, okay? We looked at standard methods like misdirectionals, where I stretch back and away from my opponent's hands, and then we start misdirecting to go up to the side. Okay, we looked at wrist control methods where you get a pull back and then you come up on the guy. And these are all good methods, okay? But to hit the move repeatedly against tough resistance, my favorite method involves this, a cross frame, where my hand goes on his shoulder and my forearm and elbow goes across the line of the collarbones, like so. Okay, the reason why this is my favorite is because it does a good job of controlling the direction of his head. It allows me to stop him coming forward. He wants to come forward with his shoulder and bicep and stop me. He wants to come forward with his head to stop me from coming up. He wants to come forward with his hands to stop me coming up. Okay? And if I just sit up into him, it can be awfully hard. When someone's in this position, I want to split their hands and get my hands inside. So I remove the hands by taking inside position. Then I remove the danger of the shoulder and the head by taking the cross frame. When he tries to drive forward now, it's quite difficult. You can hold him off. Sometimes I maneuver my hips to do this, to help. Okay, I go from closed guard to almost like a scissor sweep type position. Then from here, I just start building up to an elbow. Okay, so when he goes to push into me, I've got a good braced elbow behind me. If he does push me back, it's not the end of the world. And you'll be surprised how often you can turn this into other forms of attack. Okay, so the guy gets scared of pushing into you. Because when I start coming up like this, he starts pushing into me, he starts giving me arms. Okay, that's risky for him to do. So they become reticent about pushing. So once I get to this position, I come up to an elbow, then it's a very short movement to take my hand back, and we're up. Then from here, it's all about that foot to the floor, and we're up into the side sit-up position. Okay, so my favorite way to work is first, to get past his hands, go inside. Once you're inside, get to this position. When he tries to bring the head forward, you can hold him off. You can wiggle your hips a little bit out to the side. And then from here, you start fighting your way up and getting an elbow behind you. Once the elbow's in behind you, that's when you just slide everything by. You slip the elbow by and your head moves outwards. Don't move into him with your head. Move everything outwards here. Okay, even when he tackles you now, you're going to be in a position where you can start whipping people over. Okay, so once again, closed guard situation. First, inside his wrists. Then, get that arm across. Shift your hips out if necessary. Okay, wrestle with his weight there on your forearm, so your body's already kind of side onto him. Then take your elbow out behind you. If you get pushed back down, you're going to have good opportunities to counterattack. If he doesn't push you back down, you're going to have good opportunities to come up and sweep this guy. Okay? So this is always my favorite way to deal with tough opponents who know you favor this move and get up into that side setup position where you've got your height advantage. I use the cross frame. I'm going to demonstrate it with our bodies facing away from the camera so you can see the vital role of our hips. Doesn't look like much, but it does play an important role. Okay, when I first come in, it's just about the hands inside the wrists. Then we form that cross frame. I'm going to recommend to you, scissor your legs out just a little bit. Nothing crazy, just a little bit. And relock your guard. Even just getting a little bit on my side helps that action of pushing back. If I'm directly underneath them, the cross frame doesn't do a lot of good. Okay, so our whole thing is just to get just a little inside, shift our hips, and get into a position rather like a scissor sweep. But instead of being down here, you're at the hips. Okay, once you get to that scissor position, you can relock your guard if you want, and then start bringing your elbow behind you and coming up and testing them. If he's so strong that he just shoves you back down to the mat, well, that's when you start going into your counter offense. But you'll be surprised how hard it is for him to push you back down when you've got an elbow brace behind you. When he goes to shove you, you've got a pretty good base of support here. And it's not that hard now to sit up this way. Guys, don't sit up into him. Don't bring your chest to your hand. Bring your chest outside his elbow. Let's change our angle. Not that far. Here's his elbow. Okay? When I come up, I don't go towards him. I don't go into him, my head towards my own wrist. I go here, so that my whole chest is over his elbow. Even if he did go to return me to the mat now, if my chest is outside the elbow, we're good. Where I can't be is my chest inside the elbow. Drive into me. It's tough. Drive into me. Go. When my chest outside the elbow, that's when I can sustain it. Okay? So your whole thing, from here, get your hands inside the wrists. Secure your cross frame. Get a little hip angle. Relock if necessary. And then start building up to an elbow. When it's time to come up, get your chest outside his elbow. Plant your foot. Get your chest facing down towards the floor. He goes to put me back down. Go. Push into me. It's going to be very difficult. Okay, and you're going to be able to come up into strong resistance and get to your side sit-up position. Now, I want you guys to be highly effective with your side setup. It's a simple move, it's a well-known move, but it's a damn good one. And if you become strong in this, you're going to get great results from it all the way through from white belt to black belt and beyond. Understand that there's an ideal arm position when you go into this, and there's a slightly less ideal. Jiu-Jitsu is a sport where you have to be good even when conditions aren't ideal, so it's important you know both. Okay, as we've been pointing out, height is the most relevant consideration in a side setup. Once we start coming up on our training partner, the best situation is to come up on your hand because it gives you the most height to work with. Okay, when we're braced up on our hand and our hips come up high, there's so many good moves from this position. However, let's be realistic. What's ideal and what you get served in life are usually two different things. You guys must be able to come up to an elbow and still be effective. Okay, you don't gain as much height, it's true, but you can still be very effective working just from an elbow. Okay, don't think that the only way the moves I'm about to show you can work is from here. It's better from here, I'll grant you that. But you can knock someone over, sweep them, and enter into submissions just fine from down on your elbow. Okay? So understand that the ideal isn't always possible. And sometimes you guys are going to have to work from an elbow. So ideally, we'd love to be able to come up into situations where we're braced out here. I generally find the more behind you the arm is, the better, up to a certain point. I can't let Jay reach behind my back and get a hold of my arm. That can create problems, okay? So I can't get crazy here and give him an easy gift with my arm. But I do want my hand further behind me rather than out to the side. The more out to the side, even a gentle pressure will return me to the mat. We have to have some effective brace behind us. That's where our hand comes all the way behind us like so. But not so far that now the guy can just start grabbing your wrist and cause all kinds of mayhem. So this is about the ideal. But let's be honest, guys, you can't always get up to the ideal position. Sometimes you've got to settle for this, and you'll still be expected to be effective working from your elbow, okay? Many good people have been swept from an elbow, and you should be able to do it too, okay? So when we go up and brace ourselves, ideally, we'd love to be here. But as I'll demonstrate later on, from here, we also need to be effective, okay? Those are the two arm positions from which you will need to be effective with your side setups. Now, there are many moves from a side setup, but there's no question in my mind that the most important one, the one I want you focusing on, is the hip sweep. This scores regularly in jiu-jitsu competition. Interestingly, it also scores very well in MMA competition. It's one of the classic closed guard sweeps that translates best to mixed martial arts as well as grappling. Let's look in quite a bit of detail at this move. It's a very important one for your development. And if you only had one move from the side setup position, this is definitely the one you'd want to excel at. Okay. We've been trying to point out that most of the side setup position is bound around the idea of height and getting past your opponent's head, shoulder, and hands, okay? We've seen that once we get past those hands and we can start coming up on people from here, we want to have a good brace behind us. It is preferred to be on a hand, so I'm going to demonstrate that first, okay? Once we come up, your guard will open and you will place, let's rotate this way, James. For a right-handed sweep, I will place my left foot down on the mat. That's important because that's what enables me to elevate my hips, okay? I want to aggressively push my hips up and over my training partner's hips. Once we get to this position, I want to close him in. You have two great options here. The first option, once you've closed your opponent's foot in, is to drive a knee to the mat. That sits him on a hip. Okay, so coming back. First option, drive the knee to the mat. Once the knee comes to the mat, it's all about the second leg scissoring across. I'm going to let Jay base out with his hand so he doesn't fall. Not yet, buddy. And then from here, when I go to hit him, it puts a lot of rotational power on him. Okay? Second option. From here, instead of putting my knee on the mat, I'm going to put my toes on the mat. So when I come up, I put my toes on the mat like so. This creates a spring leg effect so that when I go to take Jay over, he doesn't just fall over, he elevates over. And you get a much higher amplitude throw. This corresponds, standing Jay, to the notion of Tai Toshi as a throw. In Tai Toshi, when we work with Tai Toshi, I place my foot across in front of my training partner and make a spring leg, so that as I go to throw Jay over the top, my leg springs. And that's what takes him over into the throw. Okay, you get the same effect with the hip sweep. You have a choice between the knee on the floor and the spring leg. A natural question for you to ask is, which one should I choose? If you want amplitude and you want the guy to fly, use the spring leg. If you just want to dump him and get on top with no amplitude and just get mounted nice and safe, then use the knee drop method. Okay, let's have a look at both. I'll look at knee drop method first. Okay, so from here, first, got to get away from his hands. We never just go straight up into his hands. It's always away first. Your guard opens. You can start with a misdirection to come up. We come up directly to our hand whenever we can. It's always better if you can. From this position, opposite foot, opposite hand to the mat. Okay? Opposite foot, opposite hand. Gives us height. Now, first one, drop your knee to the ground. Watch Jay's equilibrium when I put the knee down to the mat. Knocks him off. Okay? Now the next big thing is to take away his base of support. And then from here, I take a big step across his body. Watch my left leg, it just steps across, and that's what puts him down. Okay? First, go away from the hands first. Put some weight on me. I can't come up into his weight. So your first thing is always bring your hands away from his to make his hands less effective as a barrier. Open, misdirect, and come up. From here, opposite foot, opposite hand, gives height. Then make a choice between the spring leg or the knee drop. We're looking at knee drop first. So as my knee drops outside his knee, when he goes to step out, move away, he's trapped in place. And then my other leg takes a big step across. And that's what puts him down. Okay? From another angle. He's got hands on me. We bring our body arched out like so to reduce the effect of his hands. We open our guard, we fake, and come up. Opposite hand and foot. We're coming up high. From this position, we drop our knee, big step across, and down he goes. Now let's contrast this with the spring leg method. In the spring leg, the entry never really changes, but this time, instead of me coming up and knee dropping, I dig my toes down into the mat. My knee never touches. Now when I take the big step, my leg extends and it creates a spring leg effect where his whole body comes off the ground. One gives amplitude and one gives control. Because this is jiu-jitsu, I generally prefer control as a consideration. I think it's better to land mounted on people and control the position. So I personally have a general preference for the knee drop method, but that's just me. If you want to send someone flying, you want some amplitude, you want some highlight reel effects, go with the spring leg. Let's have a look at spring leg again. We come through and get away from the hands. We fake and come up. I put the toes down on the mat, and there's the launch position. From here, as I whip my left leg across, my right leg will straighten. And as a result, Jay doesn't get pushed over, he gets lifted up and dumped. Okay, so you get far greater amplitude with the spring leg method. Let's go deeper into the hip sweep and look at two potential directions of force, both of which are highly effective. You can either drive your opponent backwards at 45 degrees, or you can turn your body to face the same direction as him and throw him in a forwards direction. Both are highly effective, and you'll never maximize your true potential with the move until you learn to use both in unison. So, from closed guard situation, we managed to come up into the side sit-up. The first directionality of force is 45 degrees to the back. To do this, my chest must face towards my opponent. The disadvantage of this is that I'm presenting a squared surface that my opponent can body lock and put me back down to the floor. Okay? The advantage is that it creates a very strong reaction in your opponent's bracing defensive arm. Okay, so if I come up and over my training partner's hips and I successfully trap his arm, he can't brace out, we get a quick dump straight backwards. Okay, so it's just a quick short movement over our training partner's hip at 45 degrees to the rear. We start off closed guard. We come away from his defensive braces and we come up into the classic side sit-up position. First one, we go straight through and just drive straight backwards. He can't base out, and as a result, we knock him down. Okay? The disadvantage of this method is that it presents a squared chest to your opponent. It's mechanically very quick and strong, but it does give a squared chest, which your opponent can use to push you back down where you came from. If you get up quickly, that won't be an issue. You'll knock him down before he can do anything. But if there's any delay, or if the guy's anticipating the move, maybe you've hit it successfully a couple of times, he's starting to see the movement pattern, then it can be an issue. So if we feel there's going to be a push back, that's when you switch tactics. Instead of knocking him backwards at 45 degrees, you're going to turn your whole chest to face the mat. And you're going to take him in the same direction that he's pushing into you. So, we come up and we hit the side setup. Here, I'm presenting my chest forwards and giving him something to work with. Instead, I turn my chest back. Even if he body locks me now and he goes to drive into me, better knock me down, Jay. It's very difficult because my chest is facing the same direction as him. I'm going towards my base of support. The more he drives into me, the easier it becomes to whip him over. Okay? So this is very good when people are doing a good job of pushing back on you. What I typically find is the best response is to use both in unison. We come up. If I get the beat on him, just knock him straight backwards. No reason to delay. If I come up and he tackles me around the waist, it's not going to be possible to go forwards. Now it's about turning my chest down so that even if he did return me to the mat, it's the return in the direction that I need to knock him over. Okay? So typically what happens is you either go immediately over his hip and knock him backwards at 45 degrees, or if you get stopped halfway up, you just turn your body and take him over in the same direction that he's pushing. One wins by getting up quickly and knocking him down, and the other wins by sharing his energy going in the direction he's going. So let's have a look at this again. A very short and easy movement involves just coming up and just knocking our training partner backwards. Not directly backwards, but at 45 degrees. If you get stopped, then it's up to you to start turning in this direction towards your own base of support. So as he drives towards my base, just whip him over in the same direction. Okay? Whenever you go to perform a hip sweep, your opponent will always desperately try to find the mat with his hand as a base of support to prevent the sweep from working. So of course, it's up to you to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's have a look at how we're supposed to trap our opponent's arm. Okay, you've got a bunch of choices here, and they're all pretty good choices. Once we get up into a situation where we get into the side sweep position, the fundamental choice is, will you trap the arm first or will you hip sweep first? Most of the time, we prefer to trap the arm first. Okay, don't worry, we'll cover the other situation very shortly. The basic choices you have are between tricep grips, they're very good, wrist grips, where I thread my wrist around my training partner's elbow, and forearm grips, where I thread my whole hand over the forearm. This is the most secure grip, but it's also the longest to get into, takes the longest time to get into, it's the hardest one to attain. So you don't see it so often. It is a good grip, however, very strong. The wrist here takes almost no time to attain and is almost as strong as the forearm grip. It's a good grip to use. And the easiest one to get is just to physically hold your opponent's arm just a fraction above the elbow. Okay? All three will work, but this is the least secure. This is pretty secure. This is very secure. This one is hard to get. This one's pretty easy to get, and this one's very easy to get. So you've got a trade-off there between how secure it is versus how easy it is to attain. Now, once we get up here, your whole goal is to prevent his hand reaching the mat. That's what he wants to do, okay? If I hold, he reaches for the mat, it's going to be tough. Doesn't matter which method I use. All of them are going to make it difficult for him to reach the mat. I don't care if he reaches the mat partially, that's fine. What I can't do is let him reach the mat outside of his elbow. If he reaches the mat inside his elbow, it won't stop him from falling over. So he has to take his elbow, he has to take his hand, there's his elbow, outside his elbow. The further the better. But if his hand reaches the mat inside his elbow, it won't do him any good. So his hand has to go outside the elbow to be effective. And that's what makes it so easy to take it away. You don't have to move it all the way, you just have to move it inside his elbow. So if he touches the mat, that's not going to help him. We can still take him over. So you don't have to do a perfect job of controlling his arm. You just got to make sure his hand touches the mat. If it does touch the mat, inside the elbow. What you can't tolerate is a hand touching the mat outside the elbow. So your job in these situations is just to prevent it from touching outside the elbow. When he goes to reach for the mat, that's not going to help. It's inside the elbow, and you can put him down. Okay? So you can see that you don't have to have a perfect arm grab. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to thread your hand all the way through. It's good if you can, but it's not a requirement. Okay? So once again, we start off inside position, working like so. From here, we start coming up. We thread through, we capture our training partner's arm, and then from here, we're in perfect position to knock this guy over. Okay, so that's your first strategy. Second strategy is to perform a hip sweep first and let him post on the mat, and then take away his base of support. This certainly does work. I generally prefer to take away the arm first, but there's nothing wrong with doing this. We come out to the side, and from here we hip sweep first and force his hand on the mat. This is the time you want to get your whole wrist inside, because you've got an exposed arm to work with. Okay? And then from here we need a strong grip to take his hand off the mat. What I do is I try and take his hand to the shoulder, just like so. Okay? So when he bases out, I don't like this grip anymore, because the hand now carries weight. So if we're going to use the second strategy, I recommend put your fist inside, like half of a kimura. Now, he can make his arm as strong as he wants. It means nothing. You just take it off the mat and just work him right over. Okay? So when it comes to trapping the arm, here's the long and the short of it. If you elect to trap the arm first, this is the standard method. I believe it's the best method all around. You've got three good options. Once you come up, your three options are holding the tricep, locking your wrist under his elbow, and locking all the way over the forearm. The tricep is the fastest and the easiest one to get, but the least secure. But the good news is, it doesn't have to be that secure. All you got to do is keep his hand inside your elbow. So that's fine usually. This one is a nice all-round. It's pretty strong, it's pretty easy to get. This one is very difficult to get if the hands are in close to my body. Close. It's hard to get, but if you can get it, it's fucking strong as hell. Okay? However, it's usually overkill, because all you have to do is prevent his hand from being inside the elbow. That changes when you elect to hip sweep first and allow his hand to the mat. Now you need a strong grip. So in these cases, I always recommend get your wrist inside of his elbow. So in the case where we elect to come up and hip sweep and force his hand to the mat, just grabbing the tricep now make your body strong. It's not going to be enough. Okay? Now we've got to go through and get our whole wrist inside his forearm. So when his hand is bearing weight and it's got lots of strength in it, you can easily pull it up off the mat and take this guy over. Okay? So that's how I like students to think in terms of capturing your opponent's arm. Now, the hip sweep is a wonderful move, but it suffers from one big drawback. There's a lot of movement required before you can even get into the position to make it work. So it tends to be a move where you hit it once or twice, and then everyone sees the setup to it, the movement over to the side, and they're like, ah, okay, he wants to set up on me. And they have a lot of time to stop you from coming up. As a result, it is crucial that you have good follow-ups when someone stymies you in the middle of your attempt to come up. Let's have a look at those now. Okay, from a closed guard situation, we've seen this idea of getting inside our training partner's hands and forming the cross frame. We form a slight angle, and as a result, we're able to start coming up to an elbow and pushing on this guy. There's going to come days that you end up second best in a pushing contest. It's going to happen. So when you see your opponent put his hands on your chest and start pushing you back, you can feel like, oh, there goes my side setup. It's all gone. Okay? Don't see this as failure. There's good opportunities from here. So when we go inside our training partner's wrists and form that frame and start coming out to the side, as we build up to an elbow and we see this guy putting a hand on the chest, we're just going to catch right here at the arm and put our foot on the hip. Now you have a lengthened arm to work with. Immediately, second hand goes over the top and catches our training partner right there at the trap. Second foot comes up and touches our own hand. You won't be able to hold him here forever, but you don't have to. From here, we just throw the second leg over the top. You have a nice extended arm to work with. We come straight down to the wrist. As soon as we get a hold of the wrist, we double up on it. The hips come up, and we're ready to attack with Judy Gatame. So from closed guard, we get inside our training partner and start turning our body out. Feet lock, form our brace, elbow comes in, and we start the pushing game. You feel you come off second best. We plant our foot and turn the corner. Catch, legs go over the top, and we're ready to go with Judy Gatame. Second option. From here, we bring our hands in, we start off balancing this guy, and he withdraws his hand. So now you can't capture the hand. Damn it. Can't hit the previous move. The previous move, his hand was on my chest. That gave us the elbow. Now he's done the exact opposite. He's shortened his hands. When we see this going on, we just take our hand over the top, come up, and then from here we use our hips to bump and force his hand defensively to the mat. From this position, it's an easy thing to put our foot inside his leg. So when he tries to bring it back, he can't. Now we just pull, second foot comes up high, and then transfer across. Now we're in the perfect position to lock up the figure of four. When he tries to move away from us, it's so easy to pull yourself to an advantageous angle and strangle for the finish. Okay? So your opponent has several major options when it's time for us to work in this position. Okay? First option, when we get into a pushing contest, is to push back. When we see that, we immediately pull the arm across, capture, legs in place, and it's done. You hit that a few times, and pretty soon your opponent starts wising up, and he withdraws the hands. Now we come up, capture around the collar, start running his hands down to the mat. I don't want to just come back down, and he brings the arms in. Now it's hard to go to triangle. So once we hit this guy, we put our foot right inside. Second leg goes over the back, and opens up the initial triangle. He tries to yank out. It won't be easy from here. He goes to pull up and away, and we do what we always do. We pull our knee inside the shoulder, make our various adjustments, and strangle. So these are some really practical ways to work around initial failure with this move. Please understand, guys, that as strong as the side sit-up position is, once you get into it, it is one of the longer moves in jiu-jitsu. There's a big duration in time between the start and the finish. So once you start hitting it successfully, you're going to get a lot of people stopping you by either pushing, in which case we arm lock them, or pulling back and away, in which case we triangle them. Ideally, we perform the hip sweep from our hand, but the world is never an ideal situation. You're fighting tough competitive people. They know what the moves are that you're trying to attempt. So we have to be able to develop the skill of hip sweeping from an elbow rather than a hand. Let's have a look at this now. You will lose height and as a result, a degree of leverage, but you can accommodate this through your hips. As we come up to the side, we find ourselves pinned on an elbow and we can't get up to a hand. So it's true, you're lacking a little bit in height here. This will make it almost impossible to take your opponent backwards at 45 degrees. However, you will still have the option of taking the guy forwards. As we lock up on our training partner's arm, we're going to come forward like so, and you have a choice now between spring leg or knee block. I leave it up to you. They're both great choices. As Jay tries to knock me over from here, he can lock his hands, do whatever he wants. All I got to do is keep my hips higher than his. We do that by taking, in this case, my left foot and planting it on the mat. Now, I just look back in this direction. So that as Jay goes to knock me over, we're in a good position now just to whip him straight over for a conclusive finish. Okay? It's very important that if you are going to sweep from your elbow, you got to take him in the direction he's pushing, because you no longer have a height advantage. You can't go over his hips and take him backwards anymore. You've got to whip him around to the front. So, from closed guard situation, we make a good movement out here to the side, and we come up here to an elbow. From the elbow, we just take our opposite foot and take our hips up high. My chin directly over my hand, my elbow bracing. as he tries to return me to the mat, your whole thing is to push your hips up aggressively into him. Okay, then from here, we just take that big step across and whip him over into the mounted position. From another angle. So, we come out to an elbow. From here, he can body lock me even at the start of the move. I just take this foot and I just push my hips up into his. Now, as he tries to body lock me back to my elbow's a pretty strong brace, and then from here we just whip our training partner straight over into top position. So this is an excellent alternative in situations where you cannot get to the preferred hand position. You must learn to sweep from an elbow. Remember guys, in a competitive situation, you're not going to be able to work from ideal positions all the time. Sometimes you have to work from slightly less than ideal positions. The elbow variation is a classic example of this. We've been over a bunch of details with the hip sweep, and that's very important because I consider it by far the most important move out of the side sit-up situation. It's, as it were, the king of that particular series of moves. Let's look now at all those disparate details and start tying them together so you can be effective tomorrow on the mat. Okay, we've seen first and foremost, your whole goal is to get to this position. What is this position? That's where my hips are higher than his hips, preferably on a hand, but at a minimum on an elbow. And from here, my chest outside of his elbow. The direction going this way, okay? If we get a quick knockdown, you can take him backwards at 45 degrees by putting a knee on the mat. However, most of the time against strong resistance, you're going to have to go towards the direction your fingers are pointing on the mat. When he drives into me and I drive into him, it's tough. But if I turn to in the same direction my fingers are pointing, that's when you can start putting people down. Okay? So, getting there. We saw the idea of, put your hands on. I'd never go up into his hands. You go away from his hands. It's hard just to come straight back up. You go right back onto his damn hands again. So we always want to get his hands and head moving in a direction and then beat him in the opposite direction. You want to have hand and opposite foot. Bear this one. Hand and opposite foot is what elevates you. Your hips up on top of his hips. Your chest up into his chest. And then from here, either a quick knock backwards at 45 degrees or against strong resistance in the direction your fingers are pointing. You have a choice between knee dropping, using your knee to block his knee, and then a high step over the top, or the spring leg, where I'm on my toes. And then from here, physically lift him up, and we end up in a 4-point or tripod position over the top of our training partner. We've seen that, in my opinion, the most effective entry into the move involves getting inside position and then a cross frame. Shifting our hips a little out to the side and playing in this position here. Okay, as you make various threats on your opponent, maybe threatening Kimura or what have you, you feel there's an ability to come up. It's usually when you feel the head moving backwards. So if I'm pulling on him and I feel pullbacks, that's what we're looking for. We quickly come up and we're hunting to get our chest out over his elbow. Not coming into him, but coming up like so. And then from here, we're looking to whip people over. The best, in my opinion, is to land with 2 knees down. That's why I favor putting my knee on the floor. That way you end up mounted on people, as opposed to up here, where they can surprise you with ashigarami and all kinds of counterattacks. Okay? So I tend to sacrifice control for amplitude. Putting all this together now. We start off, we've got a training partner in front of us, and we start moving him down on the mat. Now, from here, sometimes we can about to whip him over just from our elbow. When we go to work in these positions, we have to capture his elbow. You can grab with your hand, you can grab with your wrist. Sometimes you can even thread your hand all the way through. Doesn't really matter. Anything that prevents him from basing out with his hands. You have to be able to catch it and draw it in. When he tries to base now, there's nothing to base with, and we end up on top. Okay? So, here we are. Hands go inside. Forearm frank. Shifting our hips. Working in this position. Maybe threatening an arm lock. So feel him pulling away. That's when we can start sitting up on people. We threaten an arm lock. We feel him coming up, and that's where we want to be, cross framing. We quickly cut up, and from this position, just whip the guy over. The scissoring effect comes from blocking with either my knee or the spring leg, and then the second leg stepping across to a point here. The best way to do it is to look at your own hand. If I look this way and he's pushing back into me, you tend to collapse. You want to look back at your own hand and sweep in the direction your fingers are pointing. He goes to drive into me now, go. And I can hold him up and take him over. If I'm facing him and he drives into me, it's only the strength of my right arm, drive, that holds me up. When I look back with elevated hips, it's the strength of my legs that hold him up. He drives, and over we go. Okay? So, the hip sweep, arguably the most important move from the side sit-up position.